Have you ever noticed your screen claims 4K at 120 Hz, yet dropouts appear? HDMI and DisplayPort matter because the plug looks the same. But here's the strange part. The bit rate inside shifted. Two menus can look right while the link fails every time, which is frustrating. Here's how to read spec sheets. When HDMI wins, when DisplayPort wins, and which label protects you. What display cables do. Now let's talk about what these cables are moving. HDMI and DisplayPort aren't magic hoses. They're digital pipelines that carry pixel timing, color numbers, and optional audio. They also move modern extras like HDR metadata and HDCP for protected content. HDMI stands for High Definition Multimedia Interface. DisplayPort is VISA's packetized display standard. HDMI 1.0 landed in 2002, and DisplayPort 1.0 followed in 2006. Both beat VGA on clarity. HDMI always put audio on the same wire, and DisplayPort can do the same. Classic HDMI often uses TMDS, Transition Minimized Differential Signaling on 3 data pairs plus a clock, and picture 3 parallel lanes with a metronome. DisplayPort uses a main link with 1, 2, or 4 lanes, where speed is negotiated and pixels ride as micropackets. The AUX channel handles setup chatter like EDID, and the source learns what the display can do before it commits to a mode. Picture a water pipe where bandwidth is the pipe width in gigabits per second. Resolution and bit depth are how much water each frame needs, and refresh rate is how often you refill each second. If the math doesn't fit, you shrink the poster, lower resolution or refresh helps, or you cheat smarter. Chroma subsampling like 4:2 trims color detail, and display stream compression zips the image. It can still look lossless to your eyes. Living rooms lean HDMI on TVS, receivers, and consoles, while PCS and high refresh monitors often favor DisplayPort. Your laptop's USB-C port may hide DisplayPort alt mode inside a tiny shell. But here's the thing. Cable length and quality cap real-world speed, and silicon often outlives the wire. A sticker that says HDMI 2.1 doesn't promise every optional feature because that is decided per device, not per logo. Those EDID reads are also why a flaky adapter can misreport what the panel truly supports, which is another flavor of the spec sheet trap. Hold that frustration about it should work. Next, we stack the HDMI generations. Those gigabit numbers will finally mean something. HDMI from 1.x to 2.1. Next up, HDMI's speed ladder. Each certified tier is a rung you cannot skip. Shopping for a 4K HDMI cable without a category is like buying a highway where you never checked the lane count. Version Plus certified class tells country road from freeway. Early HDMI 1.0 through 1.2 covered 5 gigabit class 1080p. However, 1.3 and 1.4 raised the ceiling, and 1.4 is what people associate with 4K at 30 Hz. eARC, 3D, and the HDMI Ethernet channel appear when hardware implements them. HDMI 2.0 and 2.0b top out near 18 gigabits per second on TMDS. Unlocking 4K at 60 Hz for typical color lands here, while HDR static metadata paths grew on that same rung. Both ends must still implement it. HDMI 2.1 landed as a spec in 2017 with gear following later. FRL, fixed rate link, advertises up to about 48 gigabits per second beside legacy TMDS. That is how 4K 120 and 8K 60 enter the conversation. Chroma, bit depth, DSC, and the mode table still vote. Picture TMDS as the old highway lane map and FRL as the new express stack sharing the connector. 4K 120 with VRR from console to TV needs the TV, console, cable, and port to agree. Soundbars favor eARC for higher bandwidth return than classic ARC. Here is the buyer twist. HDMI 2.1 on a box is not a promise covering VRR, ALLM, QMS, QFT, and every gaming feature. Manufacturers pick optional blocks, long passive cables fail at the edge, and chips may still claim the spec on paper. Remember the hook? Two menus can both look correct, yet they still disagree if the link cannot train to the bitrate the mode demands. Quick reminder, if you're finding this helpful, that subscribe button helps us make more videos like this. Now back to the other major wire in your desk setup. DisplayPort from 1.x to 2.1. Moving on to DisplayPort. Picture the USB-C tunnel your dock uses to feed dual monitors. The letters on the plug can hide an entire link inside. Vaser introduced DisplayPort 1.0 in 2006. The big jumps people remember are 1.2, 1.3 and 1.4, then 2.0 and 2.1. That last jump is the UHBR story. Think in per lane speed times lane count. DisplayPort 1.1 HBR sits at 2.7 gigabits per second per lane. 1.2 with HBR, 2 doubles lane speed, so you land near 5.4 gigabits per second per lane on a 4-lane link. 1.3 and 1.4 add HBR 3 near 8.1 gigabits per second per lane. Call the total roughly 25 to 32 gigabit class after overhead, unless you're reading the exact table. DisplayPort 2.0 and 2.1 introduce UHBR tiers. Press summaries often list about 10, 13.5 and 20 gigabits per second per lane. 4-lane totals can then approach an 80 gigabit class raw. The exact figure depends on mode, so verify the Visa line item before you trust a headline. Negotiation is the soul of DisplayPort. Source and display pick lane count and rate and tune like musicians before a concert. Packets ride the main link while AUX handles setup, which is why Thunderbolt and USB 4 tunnels love DisplayPort. PC gamers meet DisplayPort on GPS and adaptive sync paths. Multi-stream transport can daisy chain monitors where supported, more office than living room. Flexible lane math keeps the dock story strong, yet a cable that passed HBR3 may choke on UHBR. Here's the catch. TVS sometimes offer DisplayPort with fewer features than HDMI, so read the sheet, not the myth. You might be wondering why both worlds exist. Patience. First, we do the math. That is what makes 4K 144 possible on paper and messy in real life. Bandwidth, resolution, refresh, and DSC. This is where most spec confusion lives. I'm flipping the camera toward you for a second. You have seen 2 monitors both labeled 4K, yet they can demand wildly different cable performance. 8-bit 444 at 60 Hz is one bill, and 10-bit HDR at higher refresh with full RGB is another bill. The bezel label hides the bitrate invoice. Uncompressed need follows a simple idea. Multiply horizontal pixels by vertical pixels, multiply by refresh, multiply by bits per pixel, and add timing overhead. Chroma subsampling changes bits per pixel. 444 is full color detail for sharp text, and 422 trims horizontal color resolution. 420 is common in broadcast plus typical HDMI mode tables, and it is thriftier still. So the same resolution on the box can mean different gigabits on the wire, because display stream compression is the standard zip for the link. When implemented well, it is visually lossless and lets a mode fit that mathematically overshoots uncompressed budgets. That is how 4K at 144 Hz with deep color sometimes exists when the naive multiplication says it should not fit. The link says otherwise whenever DSC is allowed. Picture sliding posters under a door, where bandwidth is the slot height, and you can fold the poster to mimic DSC. You can send fewer color stripes for subsampling, or slide slower for lower hertz. Or you buy a taller slot, meaning a better cable and a higher lane rate. Trade-offs stay honest. Not every device enables every DSC mode, and subsampling can soften small text even when video looks fine. Sometimes compression is the compliant answer that beats impossible physics on a 15-meter passive run. Skipping that math is how 2 polite spec sheets still hand you a sparkling broken desktop. If you remember one relationship, make it this. More pixels, deeper color, and higher hertz all mean more gigabits per second. Next, we decode the stickers that pretend all plugs are equal. Cable specs and labeling. Let's shift gears to the metal. Imagine each certified cord as a crash-tested car that shares the same buckle shape, but carries a different validated safety story. The connector shape never changed as fast as the bits inside, and the honest signal is often a sticker, not the shell. HDMI cable categories trace a rough ladder. Standard HDMI covers legacy shorter, lower rate expectations. High-speed HDMI became the 1080p and beyond workhorse name while marketing shifted, and you should read the fine print. Premium high-speed HDMI shows up in 4K HDR conversations. Certified premium cables can include QR traceability in the program design. Ultra-high-speed HDMI targets 48 gigabit class, HDMI 2.1 testing. Look for the official ultra-high-speed HDM. certification label when you push 4K 120 with VRR and rich color, A no-name cord might work at 1 meter, yet sparkle at 3 meters after you move the TV 2 feet farther. So, trust the certification data over the molded plastic alone. When you see QR codes on premium high-speed packaging, treat them as traceability breadcrumbs rather than theater, because trace programs exist to cut counterfeits. DisplayPort cables vary by gauge and shielding, so for DisplayPort 2 and UHBR, you shop explicit certified cables and match the tier you need. Know that worked yesterday at HBR3 is not a promise for ultra-high bit rate tomorrow. A sticker war does not replace physics. Retail blur is half the headache, and the other half assumes upgrades hit passive run in your room. Limitations include sleeve printing that often lies or omits version, and physical length still dominates physics. Active cables exist for long runs, and the advantage is fewer mystery returns when the weak link was never the GPU. Everything I just said about tier choice collapses if you misuse a one-way adapter or park on the wrong port. Time for the practical map. HDMI versus DisplayPort in real life. That brings us to the draw test. The best cable in your house matches the lowest performing weak link, and sometimes that is the wire. Sometimes it is the wrong receiver input. Sometimes a feature sleeps in a menu. Keep a labeled hookup photo on your phone so you are not guessing which input actually earned the certification sticker. Match the standard to the ecosystem. TV plus console. HDMI is native, so use the TV's eARC labeled port when you want lossless audio return paths that eARC enables. Both devices must support it, and on a PC plus high refresh gaming monitor, DisplayPort often carries the highest refresh path. Certain monitors prefer a specific HDMI input for top modes, so read the manual's rated input table and ignore the front of the retail box. Adapters are traps. Passive HDMI to DisplayPort solutions only work in narrow electrical cases, and most adapter dongles are active, one-way converters. Direction matters like a valve, and if you flip it wrong, flow stops. USB-C docks, DisplayPort lane budgeting, MST and DSC limits often cap monitors before the USB power number does. Thunderbolt tunnels may wrap DisplayPort inside. Understanding DP decodes dock behavior. That 18 gigabit class ceiling is the stress line where premium high-speed expectations split from everyday high-speed labels on longer HDMI runs. HDMI 2.1 feature subsets differ between TVs and monitors.